Welcome to the Financial Game Plan with Hannah. Welcome to the Financial Game Plan with Hannah. I'm your host, Hannah Burstey, and today I have someone really neat with me. His name is Gary Wilson. We have not met in real life. He actually posted a real estate comment on Facebook, and I went straight to his DMs. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want you on my show. He graciously accepted, and I'm super excited to have you here. Mr. Gary Wilson, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and serve your folks and hopefully share some good insight and some information and some history too. You know,
I love it. I love it. Gary, can you tell me how did you get into real estate? What is your background? What is your niche? What is it that makes Gary Wilson in the real estate world?
well, to start with, I was always fascinated with homes ever since I was a kid. I loved looking at homes and in my mind imagining what the layout was. In third grade, my best friend Kevin McKinney, his dad was an architect and he designed modern homes. In fact, they live in this awesome almost all glass, completely. The ceilings and floors were not glass, but the walls were all glass on a lake. It was cantilevered. It was just an amazing place. And I think this is what I want to do, man. So I started drawing houses at 8 years old, not the floor plan, but what it would look like from the outside, knowing in my mind what the inside looked like. Well, it turns out my grandfather, my father's father, and he was a professor in college years before, and one of the things he taught was architecture. So he taught me how to draw floor plans at 8 years old. And that Christmas, in my eighth year, my mom bought me a complete drawing set, the T-square, the board, all the compasses and the rulers and everything. I was drawing floor plans when I was 8 years old. I still do it today as a hobby. So fast forward, went to high school in very rural Virginia. I mean, it was like farms and hardly anybody went to college. I was one of the few. So Mr. Genius here applied to the School of Architecture at Virginia Tech, got declined. I didn't have the SATs. I had everything else, but they were gracious enough to call me down and say, you should have applied to general studies, and then once you're in, you can convert or transfer into the School of Architecture. Well, nobody in my high school knew anything about going to college. The counselor was just thrilled that somebody wasn't going to leave in a 10th grade to work on the farm. So fast forward, went to Old Dominion University, met my first freshman year college roommate. His name's Socrates. Soc's parents were Greek. His father was a Greek immigrant. Mother was first generation American. And they met in Greece and got married, and then eventually started a family. And Soc was the first son. He and I became roommates. When we graduated, we were going to rent. This time we were in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And his dad said, "No, you're not going to rent. You're going to buy, and I'm going to help you." And he didn't mean give us money. He showed us. He didn't give us the fish. He taught us how to fish, and he helped us get that first four-bedroom ranch, two bathroom, four-bedroom, two bathroom in Virginia Beach for a whopping $63,000. That house today is worth almost 600,000. I go by it
Gosh.
every yeah. Yep, we rented out to two other bedrooms to two other guys whose rent pretty much paid all our expenses except for about 50 bucks a piece. So that was the beginning of the rest of my life. That was probably the most fortuitous experience in my entire life. It set the direction for everything after that, you know. Yeah,
That's
that's how I
amazing.
got
So,
started.
so how did you take you and Socrates's first like slam dunk and turn it into who you are today?
Yeah. Well, again, the Mr. Genius here decided to get married at the ripe old age of 25. So
Oh,
Sock's dad had Sock buy me out because he didn't think it was good for me to be married and Sock not be married. We still own the same house. If Virginia law, if I got divorced, all this. So Sock bought me out. Now, at the time, this was a few years later, I had a total of about 3,000 into the house, and the house had appraised to 76,000 or something. And Sock gave me 8,000 for my share of the equity. Went and bought my next house with Susan, a little bit closer to the ocean. We could smell the ocean, walk to the ocean, all that. And then 3 years later, we moved to Pittsburgh. Susan was from Pittsburgh, and I wasn't banking. Banks were buying and merging. And I
mhm.
said, Susan, look, if we don't make our own path, we're going to be forced to live somewhere like Texas or Georgia. That's where all the big banks, the surviving banks, were being headquartered. And I knew she wouldn't like that, too far from home. So we moved to Pittsburgh. I wake up 35 years old, several years later, remembering one thing Sock's dad told me at the closing table. He's pounding his chest, saying, if you boys do what I tell you to do, you won't have to work for anyone else when you're 35 years old. So I started investing at 35 very aggressively, and I bought 10 multifamily properties that first year. average of 3 units.
Wow.
I had duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. The end of that first year, I had enough cash flow net that was matching my net from the bank. And I was at the time a corporate vice president. So I was doing pretty good, 5 weeks vacation, the whole nine yards. And the age of 40, I retired from the corporate world because I built up a portfolio of 170, 172 units, I think it was at that point. Eventually went on to 250 units, and all starting with that first deal with stock. And I did focus. I will tell you, and I focused on small multifamily for a lot of year, and eventually moved into the bigger. The biggest one I bought was a 90-unit apartment complex, and I could have retired off of that right there. Well, we'll tell you this. Eventually, I started a brokerage that focused on working with investors, and I learned even more about syndications and setting up, building a REIT, things like that. Real estate investment trust, um, and getting into some very, very, in my opinion, large transactions. 20 million, 165 million, 800 million. Just amazing journey. Now I'm I'll do now is teach. I just teach and travel and live life. So
You are so blessed. So all of this, your success, all of this boils down to Sock's dad. I hope that you were able to tell that man how much he changed your life because wow,
oh
that's
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Okay, so that's fantastic. Like that's really,
Mm.
really awesome. Tell me about strategies. What are some of the strategies that you've used in the past versus
Yeah,
strategies you were using today or partners are using today because our climate has changed? Tell me about that.
yeah, absolutely. So a couple of strategy is broken down in a couple different categories. The first category is, the you're either going to buy a property, B property, C property, and there's pluses and minuses in there, subcategories. But also as far as it's not just like the where it is and the age, but the condition of the property. So in the older days, I would buy properties that were livable. You pass the occupancy inspections and things like that, but clearly could use some updating. So I would buy those properties that had 30-year-old kitchens and 40-year-old windows and things like that. So I used the BRRRR method: buy, remodel, rent, refinance. That's what I did. And and I would put down this. I knew this was going to ruffle some feathers here. I studied all the no money down stuff. And the first property with Sock, the way his dad taught us, we assumed the owner's first mortgage. He was a veteran, so it was a VA mortgage. Actually, he was active duty. He had a second mortgage that we refinanced, right, as part of the closing deal. And then the remaining equity, we gave him a third note so we had three mortgages on the property, and we had out of pocket, I don't even, maybe a few $100s, that was it. So fast forward, when I'm in my 30s buying properties, I actually decided to put my own money down because at the time interest rates were, like in the nines, 9%. That's why today people get upset about seven. I'm like, that's pretty good. 7% is pretty good. But 9% a little bit painful. So I decided, instead of me having a creative purchasing strategy where I would likely pay higher interest. The first mortgage, yeah, I could get 9%, but a second was going to be for like 11. And if I had a third, guarantee it's going to be higher than 11. So I thought I'm going to put down 20%, avoid the
Mhm.
PMI, and get an 80% mortgage with the lowest rate possible, which is through a conventional bank. So I did that on my first two properties. They were a pair of fourplexes. And then I had enough money left over, cash left over, to buy a triplex. So I, right out of the gate, using my own money, I had 11 units in a very favorable equity position and a very favorable cash flow position. And then I took out a home equity line of credit that allowed me to buy three more properties. Okay. Then I took out a personal line of credit, right, up to 20. That was 25,000. The home equity was 40,000 to buy two more properties, right, and they were all of them multifamily. So very quickly, I was upwards of about 20 units, close to 20 units, and I was able to use cash flow and credit card advances to buy the remainder in that first year. I bought 10 properties that first year, and it was 30 units all in, duplexes, triplexes,
Wow.
fourplexes. Salary, the net income had matched my net salary from the bank. But again, I had the benefits. I was a corporate
Mhm.
VP, so I had 5 weeks vacation, medical, dental, the whole nine yards, you name it. So I actually stayed on for a while longer. And here's what I did. This was really important, guys, to write down. I'm very conservative, and I know that. but I will tell you, and I can show this to you mathematically. If you build a solid foundation up front, built on solid principles, having solid equity with good buildings that cash flow very well, later on you can grow much further, much faster than if you went in 100% debt right out of the gate. Because what's going to happen is if you're 100% leverage right from the get-go, all it's going to take is one catastrophe to knock you out of the race. And I've seen it happen. And that's the one thing the gurus never tell you is what happens when crisis hits. And I can tell you this, there's a law of averages, and it happens to be 7 years. In any 7 year period, you're likely to have some kind of a crisis. Now, my crisis didn't hit till like the third or fourth or fifth year out. Thank goodness. If it hits in your first year, it's gonna be hard. You're gonna have a hard time rebuilding your confidence to get back on the horse. So back to what I was doing. What I did is the next year I didn't buy a single property. What I did, Hannah, is I paid down the secondary debt. I paid down the home equity line, the personal line of credit, the couple credit cards, not a lot. So with that, I had my debt ratio was very, very good. My cash flow increased because I had less money going out for interest payments. And my equity position obviously was very solid. Then I started buying again. But here's what I did differently. I used the stair step method. So I never sold the property. I kept what I had and I kept raising rents, keeping up with the market. My cash flow became so fast or grew so fast that I didn't have to wait 6 months to buy another property. I was able to buy another property in 3 months, and then 2 months, and then 1 month. And I did that for the next 3 years. And in the end of 5 years, I had 170 something units. And I left 40 years old. I had retired, left the corporate world, and I had cash flow that more than exceeded my bank salary, paid all the insurances that I needed to be safe and secure. At the same time, had enough capital to be able to fund 4 transactions at the same time on like cash, buy cash or model for cash, and then refinance and replenish the cash flow. I'm going to give you one more thing on the financing that helped a lot. As you might imagine, I had a lot of equity, and I actually found a commercial lender. It was a private lender who was also a commercial lender who gave me a line of credit across the equity of my portfolio. So he drew up individual liens on all the properties, but he didn't record them. He said, I'm not going to record them unless you stop paying me, and then I'm going to record them. And why he did that, to this day, I was lazy, doing me a favor, didn't want to pay the fees, whatever the case was. But I found out that's a very rare thing. Most commercial lenders want to be in first position. They would want you to refinance everything with a brand new first mortgage and to let you extract the equity. I didn't want to do that because I'd amortized these properties, right? I'd paid them down. And so I had this big giant line of credit that I would go out and pay cash for the next bigger property, 11 units, 9 units, things like that. And I would do the same thing, remodel them, fix them up, raise the rents 1 unit at a time. Now get this. When I was ready to refinance that property, I would go out and get a brand new first mortgage on that property that paid off the line of credit, paid it back down to zero again as a line of credit. What did that lender do for me on that line of credit, do you think? Each time I added a brand new income producing asset,
Wow.
he increased it. Yep. And that's what I'm telling you. I know it's a game of patience. It's not like you flip a switch and the money comes out. This was all about a 5 year period. But I'm telling you, when that recession hit in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, we didn't skip a beat. We had lots of equity. We had lots of units. Even the tenants that couldn't pay rent, none of it knocked us out of the game. And I know a lot of investors that basically they went belly up in the recession. They threw in the towel, let the ship crash into the rocks and declared bankruptcy and all kinds of stuff. I never did any of that. Never foreclosure, none of it. 100% got through. And it was hard because during those years, I also broke my back in 2 places.
Oh,
So I wasn't walking, wasn't driving, and went through a divorce too. So it was like, my gosh, what else? Recession, broken back, divorce. Is there anything else? And thankfully, God said, "Nope. I think you've had enough. You've learned your lesson." And I'm going to preach for a moment, but we'll get back here. I focused so much on building the empire that I was not being, thankfully I was a good dad, did everything I could with my kids, but I took my marriage for granted. And that's why we went several ways is because I wasn't a bad guy. We didn't have any problems with money and, cheating and drugs and things like that. It was just, I just basically took, assumed everything was going to be okay, and I didn't have to pay attention. And that's the worst thing you could ever do for all the guys out there listening. Don't ever let yourself get carried away with your building an empire. And there's nothing more important than your family, your spouses, and your children. I'm telling you from experience. So, anyways, that's what preaching about.
I
So,
love it. No, keep going. I think
yeah.
it's a very big part. I know that my husband
Mhm.
and I have been on our journey for, I guess we're pushing on the 3 year point. We have a couple single family homes. We have an 11 door
Mhm.
apartment complex, and we just joined a mastermind mentorship program. And I want to go bigger, but there are days when I'm like, I mean, I've been with my husband for 18 years together, dating, married, all that kind of stuff. We're at
Yep.
18 years. And there are days when I'm just like, we are busy. You are a business partner. You're not really, it's hard sometimes to remember that you have a spouse. Luckily, our daughter comes first, so that happens before the business, right?
Good.
We've it's almost like daughter business, and then oh yeah, we're married. So I totally understand what you're saying. Can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about how you, outside of Sox's dad, how
Yep.
did you learn how to do the things that you were doing? Because you're bringing up strategies that
Yeah.
I haven't heard about. So how did you do this?
Oh boy. I tell you what, I'm glad you asked the question. Okay. So I took all the kind of, the home study courses you can imagine. Carlton Sheets was the first one that everybody had Carlton Sheets. I think I had two of them at one point. I forgot about the first one. Russ Whitney was another one. I got to meet him in person on the Queen Mary years later. It was a crazy chance encounter, but I learned from him. And then here's what I did. It really made a huge difference. I joined the local investor group. At the time, it was called ACRE, the American Congress of Real Estate. It's still around, but REIA has taken over, REIA, Real Estate
Mhm.
Investors of America. So I joined REIA, became like a charter member. They had me on panels and speaking and stuff like that. In fact, in one year, I was one of the keynote speakers on their annual cruise, because I just kept with it. And I always would give and teach. That's another thing is um, always remember to give and to teach others. It'll really help you down the road. I mean, you learn from teaching just like you learn from taking classes. But in any case, here's something I did that I found almost nobody else has done. I joined the local apartment association, and what it was actually like an apartment management association. It was an association of property managers. I never heard of it before, but I thought, hey, I saw this thing pop up. They're going to have a dinner come up, and I said, I'm going to go to the dinner. One of the best things I've ever done. Well, I go to this dinner, didn't know a soul, and I look around, the place is packed. Everybody's wearing suits and gowns and stuff like that, and thankfully I wore a jacket and a tie. But in any case, I saw a table in a corner that was all guys with gray hair. At the time, I was again like 35 years old, half their age, clearly. But my thought was, number one, it's safe because I was pretty shy and I didn't really feel like running around and acting weird, trying to meet people and butt in on conversations. I thought, I'm going to go there because it looks safe. Well, let me tell you, the old guys hardly ever got up the whole night. They just stayed there. They all knew each other, and they all owned most of the properties out of everybody in that entire room. And we're talking hundreds of people. So I got to meet some of those guys. They took me under their wing. One guy in particular, I'll give you his name, Gerhard Flufelder, this old German dude, and he has since passed away. But he took me under his wing for the next year. I didn't pay him anything, but I would go and help him like move refrigerators and stuff like that. And he had some nice units. And what he showed me was you buy the nice properties in the nice areas, they will cost you more. You get them, he said, your strategy's right. Get the ones that need to be updated, but don't get the crappy ones. So I started buying better properties and charging better rents, and they would go up more in value. That's what he did. And he was 72 at the time. The last time I saw him, he was 85, and he was still working on his properties. I stopped working on mine years before. I just thought I stink at painting, I stink at plumbing, and I love carpentry, and I'm good with that and my hands and trim work and all that. But I had kids, and I didn't want to miss out on all that stuff. I decided I'm going to pay for all those things, and that's the one departure I did. So, in any case, strategy wise, um, I learned from him a couple of techniques, and one of them was repurposing. So he was house hacking long before I even knew it was the thing. He would rent out his rooms. He would get, so he would have 5 units and 10 units too, but he would also buy a big, beautiful 5 bedroom classic, 200-year-old beautiful home in the old part of town everybody wanted to be, and he would rent out the individual rooms to medical students, traveling doctors, nurses, traveling business executives, and they would be there for 6, 9 months, 3 months on different assignments, and they would pay double the rent. It would be cheaper for them to do that than go to a hotel, but they would pay $1,000 a month for a room. So instead of him getting maybe 500 a month per unit, but this was several years ago, he would get 1,000 per room per month. So he's getting 5,000 a month at a time when that property could have maybe rented for 1,000 a month, something like that. That was a big deal. So guys, this is something else to write down. Based on where we are today, I'm just speaking about the United States of America. I've lived in Canada, taught in Canada, and we've got clients all over the world. This is just specifically U.S. investing. Um, the rents for traditional rentals have not kept pace with the increase in values. They have gone up, but if you look at the math, they haven't kept pace on a statistical basis. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. What I'm saying is it's more difficult to cash flow in a property today at purchase time than it was 10 years ago. There's some other factors that are occurring, and this is all this stuff is I have my finger on the pulse because I have agents that work for me. I have a big production team. We're in 37 states, all the big MSAs, the meaningful statistical areas. Um, so we can see what's happening policy wise. You have to look at what policy is coming out, not just from the federal government, but from the states. So at the state level, there's been more policy in the last couple of years geared towards providing low income rental housing. Okay. Now the federal government, it's not the government itself, but Fannie Mae, which is a quasi government agency, has just announced a 5% mortgage on multifamily properties. Why would they do that in an environment where interest rates are 7% for owner occupant properties, right? This is not owner occupied. It's because we need housing big time in this country. According to NARIC, it could be anywhere from 4 to 7 million units. And most of it falls in a category of affordable housing, right? And within that category, it's affordable housing in the rental world. People cannot afford to buy on larger numbers. I'm going to give you a stat on California. I taught in California in 2015 for the first time, but a professional development class, teaching agents how to work with investors. At the time, California was 36% rentership. The last time I taught there in 2019, California was 46% rentership, increase of 10% in 4 years. Now here we are 4 years later, and they have policy now to help to incentivize builders, developers, and investors to provide low-income rental housing. And they will guarantee that they will pay the rent. The government will pay the rent, but with one condition. You can't decline anybody for financial reasons, which is the one reason we do decline somebody, right? Or accept them is because we want to make a profit. That's why we do this. So that is a big, big, big caveat there. There's other examples that are around the country. I'm just giving you the big one. Um, so it tells you what the policy is, what the government's intending to do is. If you notice, they scrapped anything that has to do with home ownership. That's gone long gone. It's all about providing rental housing because we need housing big time. So what does that tell us investors? Well, if we're smart, we're going to buy some rental housing. Now I know I just said what I call the midterm rentals, like in house hacking, renting to corporate travelers and nursing, traveling nurses and so forth is the way to go. I believe in that for me personally. You've got to make your own choices in life. But for me personally, when I see the policy going that way, what other policy is likely to follow? Well, it's more government regulation and legislation to control the rental market. You see what I'm going with this? I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just telling you that's the trend. So if you focus on the midterm rentals, you don't have that worry because there's people that fall into the category of, single parents or parents with young children. That's not, these are business people that show up Monday through Friday. They sleep at night, they work during the day, they don't have their kids and dogs, they go home on the weekends, and also the employer pays the rent. It doesn't fall into the category of traditional residential renting. I do like short-term rentals like Airbnb. They're just more work. Mid-term rentals, you got to clean out every 6 or 9 months versus every 3 to 6 days, right? You don't have people throwing parties in your places and the police saying, "Hey, you can't do this anymore." and the neighborhoods are trying to shut you down. I'm just telling you, long term, the best exit strategy, in my opinion, right now is probably the midterm rentals. We used to call it corporate housing. We just now call it midterm rentals. So, in any case, so that was something I learned from Gerhard Flufelder all those years ago. He was way ahead of his time, you know. So I hope I didn't go too long on that, but that's really
No,
important.
I
Yeah.
want you to talk and to say all the things because it sounds
Okay.
like the knowledge that you have is vast and it's important. How
Yeah.
has, let me rephrase that. I'm a big book person. I love to read the
Mhm.
books. I want to listen to the podcast. I want to go to the conferences. I'm obsessed with conferences. I love to go. I want to
Yeah.
meet. I want to network. Are there any books or conferences or podcasts or anything that you do specifically to broaden your horizons when it comes to real estate investing?
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely Robert Kiyosaki. I
Absolutely.
was probably one of the first people to buy Rich Dad Poor Dad. Bought every single book he either wrote or endorsed, excuse me. He didn't induce the book, he endorsed the book. I think there's 27 in all. I took his very first training program. It's so old it's on cassette. Um, and then later on bought the same one in CD version because like my car didn't have cassette anymore. And
Right.
then I actually met him in Lake Tahoe several years ago, 2017 maybe, something like that. There was a mastermind group I was in called Go Abundance, and there's a women's
Yes.
group and a men's group. So I was in a men's group. I was one of the very first members. We got to spend the day with them, have dinner with them, and I learned a valuable lesson, guys. Or I'm sorry, I validated a valuable lesson. So again, this is something you want to remember or write down. It turns out the real estate is not the end game. It's simply a platform that you build upon which you can launch other business ventures. So if you really listen to what Robert Kiyosaki says is it's not just about the real estate. You've got to be in businesses too. You've got to either build businesses or buy businesses. So I built 7 businesses. Now, I did it before I met him. I built the foundation of a lot of rentals, built a brokerage company, built a property management company, a title company, an appraisal company, and eventually a training company. And now I built the largest production team in the United States that focuses on real estate investors. That's my seventh, and I consider my swan song. This is my. I'm not going anywhere, Lord willing. I've still got plenty of gas in the tank, but I'm loving what I'm doing so much right now because I get to teach my agents. So before I would do all my teaching, people would pay me to teach them anywhere from 2 to 25,000, but it was a arm's length deal. They would pay me whether they produced or not. What they were able to do is structure an agreement with a large broker to let me teach in exchange for a portion of commission. So the agents don't pay until they win. So
Like
I don't
that.
get paid till they win, which means I take the risk, right? Very rare, very unheard of, but it's like it keeps me on my toes. I get after people. I mean, I mean, Hannah, I coach the crap out of them because I want to get paid, you know? And
Absolutely.
and they love it. So in any case, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and did his training, do the training. I will tell you, I'm not, I probably should be careful what I say here, but if you go into the advanced like mastermind coaching, all those things, they get really expensive, guys.
Hmm.
And I think at a certain point, after you've been through 1 or 2 waves of training and coaching, you should be okay. Maybe form your own mastermind group. That's just my personal philosophy. But you can also join a group like Bigger Pockets. They're the largest organization on the planet. And ironically, I met David Green and oh shoot, what's his name? Brandon
Brandon Turner.
Carroll,
Brandon
Brandon Turner,
Turner.
excuse me.
Hmm.
Yep, met them both through the mastermind group, Abundance, um, and became good friends. Brandon endorsed my seventh book. David Green was at the same brokerage I was at years ago. I taught at his office. So all these connections, it wasn't not like guys, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but like Hannah's suggesting, in spite of me being inherently shy, I put myself out there and I forced myself to join organizations and meet people. Okay. And as you might guess now, based on me talking, I'm probably not so shy anymore. So you have to put yourself out there. You've got to engage and network, be part of, join your local chamber of commerce. If you don't have a local investor group, create one. I created a group called GIG, Global Investor Group, and we got 33 investor groups around the country. I don't run them. I have other people run them, people on my team. You can do the same thing, guys. If you don't have one, create one, even if it's online. The bottom line is start where you are. I would say join your local investor club if you don't have one, create one. Look for your local apartment association, the association of rental managers, if you will. Usually they're called apartment associations. One of the best things I've ever done. And I constantly read. I'm always reading two books, one for fun, for pleasure, like I like history. The other one is personal development. So you've got to read Think and Grow Rich. That's a must. I know how blessed I am, Hannah. I mean, I wake up every day and my first words out of my mouth are thank you. I'm just grateful. It's just absolutely beautiful. I'm not saying I don't have problems, believe me, I've had some problems over the years, but the mindset is probably the most important thing. So I'm gonna kind of give this message here for everybody. I can teach you, there's lots of people that can teach you, how to make money in real estate. It's actually not that hard once you learn how to do it. You just have to apply yourself and you can't play with fear. I'm not saying be risky, but you can't play afraid, right? You've got to put yourself out there and you've got to, make yourself make decisions sometimes with as much data as you can get. But what I'm trying to get at here is having the mindset, the heart and the mind to be able to do that is more important than the actual academics itself. So over the years, I paid people to teach me how to meditate. Okay. I made prayer a regular, every morning I spend 1 hour praying, 100% constant for all the students that I teach, my family, circumstances in the world. And then I meditate and then I exercise. And usually around 10 o'clock, I'll turn on the do a couple hours, take a break, do a few more hours, take a walk, come back, eat, do stuff like this. Every evening I'm doing something like this, a podcast recording or, teaching somebody. Um, and I relax with my mom and go read. That's what I do. And on the weekends, I'm Mr. Adventure. So, but in any case, read anything you can read on personal development, understanding how we function as humans, what makes us make decisions, what makes us afraid. Learn how to control two things. Fear, those two things we either make you very wealthy, not just in terms of money, but in all walks of life, or very poor, depending on how you control them.
Mind, body, and soul. It is all important with this business because,
Mhm.
like you said, you can't just live, eat, and breathe. Real estate, as important as it is just a stepping stone. Like I told you earlier, we're currently building our portfolio, but we're looking at some businesses to purchase as well. I am a huge
Mhm.
Robert Kiyosaki fan. I don't believe I have all of his books, but I have the majority of them. I'm rereading the Capitalist Manifesto right now. Y'all, that book is so big. It's a lot, but I'm rereading that
Mhm.
one currently, and I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I don't even know how many times. I love his thoughts, his principles. It makes
Yeah.
sense, but I want to say that I agree with you on mindset because your mindset is everything in this business. Your friends, your network is your net worth. And if your brain's not in it, you can't do this. It's everything for sure. I love everything. You are inspiring me,
Oh, thank
insane.
you.
I
Yeah.
created this podcast because I am a bubbly person. I like people. I want to talk. I love it. I'm in the midst of trying to create a mastermind group in my parish. I'm in South Louisiana, so I'm looking at creating one here. There's a lot in Baton Rouge, but traffic is gnarly. So I'm looking at creating one here. So I think that what you have said has kind of pushed me in the direction of me wanting to do that. But we are winding down on our time. I have 3 questions that I ask all of my guests towards the
Yeah,
end of our show. Are you ready for them?
sure. Yeah.
All right. So my first question is, what is something on your bucket list that you would like to accomplish within the next year?
Oh boy. Well, actually, one of them we are accomplishing. It's to go back to Germany where I was born. So the day
Oh,
before Thanksgiving, my father and my brother and my sister are all three going back to Germany for 11 days. I haven't been there since I was a kid. I was born there. My sister was born there too. But also on my team, what I'm doing is the team I build is not that it's not about me. My name's not even on the team. It was always about creating a platform to help other people build their brands, their models, their visions, what have you. So I'm actually doing that now, and I'm making the final turn to where everything I do is about the next person. Like it's like what I've been doing has been working, but I'm actually going full scale, Hannah. literally committing and devoting 100% to other people building their visions. That's the big vision for me. If I can do that this year, that would be a tremendously successful year, decade, century. It's a major endeavor, and we're actually doing it now. You know,
Wow, that's a
so
wonderful answer. That's a wonderful answer. Are you ready for question number two?
yes, yeah.
What is a skill that you have always wanted to learn?
Oh my gosh, bunches of them. So I was initially my thought, 20 years ago is I'm going to learn 12 different languages.
Okay.
Well, I'm not learning 12 languages, but I have learned four. Like I'm currently relearning German right now. Well, one skill it continues to elude me. Man, if I could just play the guitar, I don't care. I could be the banjo, ukulele, something with some strings. I just want to play something with strings. I can play drums, but I could never master the guitar. I'm just too mechanical. I just couldn't do it. So maybe a ukulele is the way to go, but that's something I wish I could develop.
Okay,
Yeah.
question number three. If you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh wow. Um, I would say get outside of your head, get outside of your skin. Never say no to opportunity. Say yes to every opportunity. Say yes.
Okay, so that answer completely speaks to me because I have turned down some opportunities here lately because I just cannot figure out how to make it work. But sounds like I need to make it work. Well, listen, Gary Wilson, you have been an absolute phenomenal guest. I genuinely appreciate your time. I know that you are a busy person, so thank you for carving that time out for me. If my listeners wanted to reach out to you, learn more about you, how can they get in reach with you?
Sure. I have a couple of websites. The one right now that I'm really wanting people to pay attention to, it's globalinvestoragent.com and allows investors around the country to find trained agents to work with them, investor agents. They know how to identify, analyze, and negotiate on and off market deals, by the way.
Sounds wonderful. To all my wonderful listeners out there, I will have everything that Mr. Wilson has said in the show notes for you. I myself am also a real estate investor and an agent, so I'm going to be going to your website to have another call with you. But guys, I appreciate your time. If you've enjoyed the show, leave me a 5-star review. If you didn't like the show, leave me a review so I know how to improve. I appreciate everyone's time. I hope you have a great day.